recently to do this. So it is my pleasure to introduce Tom Carlson, who is with USGS and has been for, well, let's just say a while, long enough to have been through a variety of iterations of our National Geospatial Program. But you can see he is the liaison for Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. And Tom has been involved in many, many projects, and I think hopefully with some of you, but I know with a lot of states and tribes, going back to the idea that, you know, having consistent geospatial layers for the nation would be something USGS should do, but we can't do it on our own. So we have liaisons like Tom. And I know a hot topic is NHD. And so we asked Tom to come and share what's happening and what's going to happen and when. That's the big question, Tom. So no pressure. And we'll make sure we give Tom's email address in the notes. So if you have a question tomorrow or next week, or a friend has a question, you can chase Tom down later. I'm sure he can answer them all in time. Right, Tom? So thanks for coming. And I'll mention the recording spiel, I guess, is simply that we're going to record this bit and we're going to put it on the PNAP YouTube channel with closed captions. And so that will enable forevermore, Tom, your words of wisdom to be shared. And so just know for everyone else out there that this segment will be recorded and shared. So, thanks, Tom.
Thanks for the invite, Jen. I appreciate that. Thanks for the intro. We'll see if I can meet some of your expectations today. Can you guys see my slide? Is that working yet? Let me try this. Sharing. Can you see that?
I can see it now, Tom. Yes.
You can. Okay. So, yeah, as Jen said, Tom Carlson. I'm with the National Geospatial Program. I have been with the program for a while, like she said, I don't know, 17 years probably. I think I met Jen as pretty close to after me getting hired and coming on. And so I've known her for a long time. And of course I say yes to her request of coming on and talking with you folks about this. My email is on the slide there, and she's providing that, or somebody's providing that email as well. If you have questions after this, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm not an authority on NHD or 3DHP. I don't know all the technical details of those things. I don't work with those products. I'm not an NHD editor or an NHD steward at the state level, nor I've ever have been. I'm not pretending to be. So I'm a liaison that works a lot with collecting data collection projects, anything to support the data on the national map. And hydrography is one of those key items on the national map. So some of you have probably heard what's going on with NHD, and that's why I was asked to come on. We're transitioning from the National Hydrography Dataset, or NHD, to the 3D Hydrography Program, or 3DHP. There's a couple links there. If you want to know more about the 3D Hydrography Program itself, if you just Google that, you'll hit it. NHD, or excuse me, 3DHP DCA Help Desk. The DCA is the Data Collaboration Announcement. I'll talk about that a little bit in a few more slides. That's where we're taking partnership proposals to work on these kinds of projects. So let's go ahead and move on here. If I can get things to work for me. So you should be looking at the second slide if I'm not incorrect there. So what is the NHD? For those of you who don't know, it's the National Hydrography Dataset. Again, Google that, you'll hit this site. There's an explanation of basically what it is there in a sentence. It represents surface water, right? We haven't got into groundwater with this. Lots of other folks in the GS work on that, but this is a surface water dataset because important to us because it shows up on our maps. Right, and so it's part of the national map, and that's why we're involved in that. In the red circle, there's a note. As of October 23, NHD has been retired. Well, what does that mean? That doesn't mean it's gone. It's still out there. all that means is we're no longer editing it or taking edits from state stewards or other federal stewards that might work on these type of projects for us. You can still access it, still download it, still use it. It's just static right now. It's going to stay that way until further notice, I guess. Right. So it hasn't gone away. It's still out there. So people have asked lots of questions about that. It's like, I still need the data. Where is it? It's still there. You can still access the data. So next slide here. Kind of start out, where did this come from in the first place? Why are we even talking about it? We started making maps in the late 1800s, topographic mapping. That was a big part of the GS. Lots of you folks probably know and understand that already, I'm sure. Some might not know that. That was kind of our mission, was to map the country. Good topography was important. And how we used to do that was through very traditional survey methods. We would build maps off of dragging chains, using levels, rods, field sketches. Maps would be compiled basically in the field, not just with the elevation, but also where the water was too, surface water. So where rivers were and streams and lakes and ponds, where the bays were, things like that. Those are all done in the same way, just all drawn in by hand. Okay. So eventually we start needing to convert those paper products to digital products. And this is really with the advent of GIS. Once we started developing that many years ago and started using that many years ago, we needed to get data. And my first GIS class back in '89, probably, it's been a while, there wasn't data all over the place like there is now. There wasn't, you can go on the internet, download anything, right? If you're lucky, you got some data from Fish and Wildlife or census data, Tiger Line Road data and stuff like that. And so we had to start building databases, and we wanted to build our database, and we digitized in those maps by hand. And that's putting those paper maps on a tablet and getting a digitizing puck out, if any of you go back that far, and digitizing in everything that was on that map. Eventually, we had the capability to scan those and digitize them in that way, but still all of that was a long process, kind of complex in a lot of ways and prone to error in a lot of ways too, changing scales and taking something that was drawn by hand and making it digital and making it accurate to the ground. Those things didn't always match up perfectly, right? Well, eventually we were able to start using ortho photographs from aircraft, aerial photos, stereoscoped, and being able to make and update maps and topography that way. And then we started using LiDAR, which was the kind of flavor of the month. And that's something I've been working on since we started working on that. And since I started with the GSR, these LiDAR projects. And so the bulk of my work really is helping set up and push through these projects on our end, partnership projects with people on the outside to collect LiDAR. And now a little bit of that is involved with 3D-HP work, kind of the same process, if you will. But with LiDAR, we started getting really accurate topography, and we were talking stuff that's centimeters of horizontal accuracy and within centimeters of vertical accuracy. So what are we going to do about water related things along with that? And we'll get through that here in a minute. Our hydrography legacy data set issues, I've underlined best available data at the time. That's a key takeaway. With all the issues and problems that were encountered with NHD and have been encountered with it, it still has been the best available data we've had to work with, okay? What this required of state stewards like Bob Harmon and his folks in Oregon are up here, Department of Ecology, Josh Greenberg and their folks, was a lot of field work, a lot of field checking data, a lot of modifying, editing the data sets, and those would be pushed up to the National Hydrography data set from the state level. And other feds would also be working on that with us too. People from BLM and Forest Service would be providing those edits and things like that to NHD. And so that data has improved over time. Watershed boundary data set, that's another issue in its entirety. The WBD and the NHD are two separate entities. Why, I don't know, but they have been for a long time. never understood why that is, never had a good explanation as to why that is. To me, it's all related to water and surface water, so it should be connected. Maybe in the future that starts to happen. What are the issues with NHD? Well, the updates aren't uniform. I'm highlighted in yellow here. If we don't update a topographic map, we don't update the NHD in those areas, it's hard to be consistent across the country with that. Some maps we have, until we started making our digital US topo product, had never been updated. And so if we're relying on an update to the topographic maps to update the NHD, there's an issue and problems with that. So national consistency of the data quality is decreased because of that a little bit over time. Surface water features don't align well with highly accurate LiDAR data or 3D elevation program data that we have now. And I'll show you some really good examples of that. So our solution, deriving hydro from LiDAR, basically, right? We've got this 3DEP program. We're about 95% or more complete across the country with collecting LiDAR. The first pass, we're going to start another pass of that soon. So with that LiDAR that's highly accurate, we're able to derive very accurate stream networks, very accurate hydrography off of that. One of the core capabilities of early GIS was taking elevation data like a DEM or a digital terrain model and generating stream networks off of that. Well, we can do that now with the GIS even more accurately than before, just because of the LiDAR itself. Acquiring 3DHP, this is something that we're setting up through partnerships. We're using best practices we've learned from 3DEP in that program, and if you have questions about that at some point, email me and we can talk at length about that. So we're kind of moving forward with 3DHP. We did a study in 2016, hydrography requirements and benefits study, HRBS 2016. This is out there. We documented many hundreds of mission critical business uses across all agencies, federal agencies, states, tribes, local agencies, counties. This type of data, since you're in StreamNet involved in that, you realize water data is very important and it's critical. And so what are the business uses for accurate hydrography? How important is it? All of this is in that study, and that helped inform us that we ought to move into something that was a little better than NHD. And so that's kind of what pushed us into this in the first place. We did a similar study for elevation many years ago, and some of you on the call might have been involved in that too, which helped inform us about the needs of the country for high accurate elevation, and started our 3DEP program. So this is kind of a continuation of that whole process. And we've learned from 3DEP and we're building on that to do 3DHP. Why is this important? This is a great local example. Stillaguamish watershed up here in Washington State. It's just north of Seattle. Some folks on the call probably know about this already. Josh Greenberg, NHD steward at Washington Ecology, pushed this through to get state funding to do this project. So this is a pilot at the state level, totally funded by the state. We weren't involved in the funding on this. I'm on a couple of their committees for this. We were able to bring in some of our technical experts to help them with the QA process, which is pretty new to this type of data set. It's complex in a lot of ways and requires new tools that we've developed and other people are developing as well. We have lots of vendors out there now that are very capable of doing these type of projects, generating this data from LiDAR. So Josh is able to push this through. So kudos to him. If you have questions about that, I told him I was going to steal some of his slides and I'd throw him under the bus here. If you have questions on this particular project, there's his email. And if you forget that, you want to know who he is, or you want to talk to him, let me know and I'll get you in touch with him. This is a great project and great example of why this is important, why we're doing what we're doing. So the evaluation of the pilot, this is the stream network in the Stillaguamish watershed here. And the important part of this slide is that little bar graph on the right. One thing I noticed quickly in looking at these data sets before they're even QA'd, not just in this pilot, but all the other pilots I looked at, was that the stream network, the density of streams increased, right? You ended up with more streamlines than you had just with NHD. And so this is after it's been QA'd, they've almost doubled the total miles of stream segments in the Stillaguamish. So you can see on the gold NHD bar graph there, it's like 3,600 plus miles of stream length. And under EDH or 3DHP, you're over 7,000 miles of stream length. So nearly doubling, which is, to me, when I first saw that, I was blown away by that. That's pretty dramatic. So what that's telling me is there's water out there that we didn't realize was out there. We didn't know the extent of this. We didn't know the extent of the network, how long the streams were, where the headwaters at, and all of these things are still maybe up for debate with some folks. Still might require some on the ground looking to determine where the headwater is or where it isn't, and some judgment call on that. But based solely on deriving this from a LiDAR data set, this is pretty remarkable in my mind. If you take, and this is from the Stillaguamish, if you take a hillshade, which is what the background is here, you take a terrain model and just do a hillshade on it. So it looks like the actual ground surface. The green line is NHD for this particular part of the Stillaguamish. The blue is the 3D HP line work that's derived from the LiDAR. Just overlay those on that background, that hillshade, and that's pretty dramatic to look at. You're looking at where it's pointing to NHD here, where my arrow is going. There's one channel following this green line down. There's another channel of NHD, and this is where the confluences are, where they join up and on down the stream. All the blue stuff is 3DHP. All the 3DHP lines seem to fall into where the channels are on the ground with the hillshade, and this is indeed true. Okay, so that's just as a quick observation on data, that's pretty dramatic and pretty significant to see something like that. So NHD is underrepresenting where things are. In this case of where it's pointing on this arrow right here, Josh has a couple of great photos he's shown to me before, standing on a road on the ground, looking across the hillside, and this is where NHD is going. There's a streamline across the hillside where there is no channel. And so there's definitely some errors in those data sets that we used to use. So we're still Stillaguamish here. Over on the left, you've got gold dashed lines that represent NHD, and the blue again is the 3DHP. It's dropped on top of a terrain model again. So the 3DHP lines are falling into those channels and into places where we didn't know were channels. Over on the right, this is another shot zoomed in on the Stillaguamish, and the gold area represents NHD, where the main channel was maybe at one time, or where it's represented as it is. And today, this is where the channel is according to 3DHP. So that's the why. That's why this is important in my mind. This is what it shows us. So trying to get there, again, we're using our skills that we learn from developing the 3DEP program and collecting LiDAR. We're using existing LiDAR over areas to start to generate the hydrography through these new techniques that we've learned and new tools that we've developed. We've used our 3DEP governance to kind of guide us in setting that governance for 3DHP. We're the second bullet there, adding this to the 3DEP data collaboration announcement, the DCA. So just this year, we put the DCA out for 3DHP along with 3DEP. So people could apply for partnership dollars, and it's a partnership, just like 3DEP is. We're not just giving people money. They have to have money to pitch in to contribute, for us to contribute to grow these projects and to do what we're able to do. And again, this follows what we've done with 3DEP. And like I said, the country's 95% or better complete right now. I think I've got another slide coming up that I borrowed from somebody else that doesn't have that number that I just mentioned, but it's pretty close. So we solicit these partnerships. Right now, the proposals that we do have, just like our 3DEP proposals, are sitting and waiting for the budget to get passed. So as a lot of you that are feds know, we have some budget issues. We're waiting on those before we can release funds and complete some of our work and some of our projects. Contracting this is a lot of the stuff I work on through our GPSC, Geospatial Products and Services contracts, and also for cooperative agreements. Those are a little different kind of vehicle for partnership. I work on both of those in my states and across the country quite a bit. And we're working on current specs for 3D-HP, and they're developing as we speak. You know, the thing we've had to do is stop editing in HD and start building the database for 3D-HP. And there's one person, I'm told, that's actually responsible for that and does that. And that's why we can't edit or take edits from stewards for NHD any longer, because we're trying to develop the 3D-HP data set itself, which I guess is pretty complex and large, and happily nothing I'm directly involved in myself. So Jen mentioned something about timing. This is something that's up in the air still. We have some guides of where we want to go and how long it's going to take. FY23, we were implementing the 3D-HP data model. Well, that's still developing, and that's not done yet by any means. We're still not quite sure what that's going to look like because it's changed over time. We've collected a lot of feedback that I was involved with from people in the Northwest, especially, to change how that model might look. And so it started out as this is how it's going to be, to we've moved the needle a little bit on the data model itself and what the data is going to look like, because we got a lot of input from people on the outside. We haven't really started populating the data model with EDH data yet because it's still building. The goal is to use kind of a prune skeleton from NHD data to fill in the blanks where we don't have 3D-HP data yet. As we start building these data sets across the country, we're going to have gaps. We know that. And so we're just going to use the line work from NHD to kind of fill in those areas until we are able to collect all that data. Moving into this year, FY24, make necessary revisions to the data model. That's happening. I can tell you, I've heard discussions about that. Developing criteria for pre-EDH data inclusion. Not all data that we will probably take in will be 3DEP compliant data at first. The goal is just strictly to use that. So we'll probably take in data that's been labeled as provisional. So it's data that doesn't meet all the 3D elevation program requirements, but still is good, accurate data. We haven't set up a data service to release data yet. We're still working on that. All the markups that we used to be able to do with NHD, they're still building those. This whole thing's still being developed in FY24. The fact that we are pushing out data collaboration announcements for partnerships tells me that this is moving along pretty well, and we'll start taking data in for this pretty soon. So 3 kind of panels here where we're at, national baseline data sets. That 3D elevation program graphic at the bottom's old. It's from last year. I think the figure I saw the other day is about 95% coverage across the country of LiDAR. So pretty dramatic that we're almost done with that, at least for the first pass. Next generation programs in the middle there, we're moving through into 3D-HP. And next generation 3DEP or elevation program, where we're going to start recollecting data over areas that we've already collected. Now we've got significant landscape changes in areas, and so it's good to have fresh LiDAR data over those. Where we want to go, the longer term goal is on the right, integrated 3D model. And so we have people looking at how to do this, what this would look like, what this really means to all of us. We want to integrate other data from the national map. So not just hydrography, not just elevation, but road data, vegetative data, building data, population data, all kinds of other stuff that we have out there. And this is kind of our end goal, is the 3D NTM, the National Topography Model. So not just the land surface, but if you drain the water out, that surface that continues down at the bottoms of channels, bottoms of lakes, bottoms of bays and estuaries, nearshore areas. We have the ability to collect LiDAR in a green band now, which is pretty effective in most areas on getting bathymetry data. I'm involved in a lot of topo bathymetry projects in the Northwest where we've piloted and studied and are doing this kind of work. I've seen some of the data results of other areas around the country as well. Pretty good data with LiDAR. Some places it doesn't work that well yet, but still under revision. And we do have other areas and ways that we can collect data from boats, other watercraft to get topography or bathymetry. So that's kind of where we're headed. And that's kind of all my slides I had for the time. I'm not sure how much time we have, but I'm happy to try and answer your questions or engage in some conversation on this stuff. My contact info is up there, so let me know if you have questions. I'm happy to talk about that.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
Sharon, I think we definitely have a couple of questions. We're about at time, but yesterday we had overbooked stuff, so let's take questions and enjoy this time that we have before.
Well, I couldn't help but notice the blimp on that graphic. Are we using blimps to do LiDAR?
I haven't seen that happen yet myself. I don't know if we're using those anywhere else, but that's a possibility, I guess.
I'm a huge fan of lighter than air vessels, so that's really great.
I know that we currently aren't taking or not taking LiDAR data that are done from UAVs or UAS platforms, but there's discussion on doing that. It just as an aside. I know lots of folks out there that are flying really good LiDAR off of drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, and I don't see why we can't start using that. Usually they're obviously very small patches compared to the larger areas that we typically collect with LiDAR projects currently, but that's something that we have people talking about, and we've been engaged in conversations with those folks for quite a while, just on how to do that, how to implement that. So a blimp, I guess, is not beyond the possibility. How's that?
I'm just going off the graphic, but yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a Chinese weather balloon.
Maybe that's what it is. I'll find out about that and see where the blimp came from. Yeah.
For that thing.
Tom. Click on his picture. Yeah. Cedric, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Tom. Cedric Cooney, ODFW. You mentioned that you're talking about using the NHD line work to fill in where the 3D HP is lacking. Can you talk more about that? Give us more information on that? And particularly given the fact that we know that NHD has not been updated for a while now. So we're really filling in, seems like we're filling in with known erroneous data. So you can talk about that.
Well, so all I know about that is that we're going to do that. The details of it, I don't have any background on at all. I would just go back to the slide where it said the best available data, right? That's basically NHD, and what we've been using is the best available data. If we've got some blanks out there where you want to do some flow modeling, let's say, and you have a patch where there's a blank and you've got that surrounded with 3D HP data, yes, you have really accurate stream data. How are you going to run something through that area if you don't have some line work, right? And so I think that that's better than nothing, I guess. What does it look like? I don't know. If you email me that question, I'll forward that on to Steve Achel and Sue Budo, and they can bat that around, I guess. But that's the best answer I have for you right now.
Okay, well, just to follow up, in using NHD to fill in those gaps, would we then be able to edit and update NHD?
I'm going to say I don't think so, but I don't know for certain if that would be a possibility. My understanding is that NHD is basically static and will stay that way. Okay, so we'll grab that line work, plop it in there where we don't have spots that are filled with 3DHP data and leave it at that for now. Again, that's something that's more details than I can provide you with.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got Van and then a question in the room. So go ahead, Van.
Hey, Van.
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
You all right?
Thanks for the presentation. Really exciting work that you're tackling. And I definitely can see the vision that USGS is putting forward. It's great. I think a couple questions. I guess the first one, as you mentioned, you kind of made reference to the PNW Hydro Framework group.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, that group sort of went on ice pretty much. And it sounds like maybe you're still having conversations with them about data model future plans, and if so, are there meetings planned? And might be good to get included if possible.
So I was asked to come in and set up those meetings and organize that, right? So we could have a conversation with people in the Northwest. Just a little background for folks. Having those meetings really is up to Steve and Sue. If they want to have more of them, I'll set those up. But we haven't had any for months now, right? We haven't gotten any other feedback recently from folks like Jay or anybody else in the region. When we first started this out, it just kind of got dropped out there, and it was a surprise to people, right? And it was a surprise to me. And how it kind of came out and everything. But our best way forward is to try and collaborate with everybody. And so we've been trying to do that, and that's what those meetings were for. And you were on some of those calls, I think, or involved in some of that. So you kind of saw what was going on there. So again, if they want to have more meetings, I'll do that. But my last conversation with our folks was they didn't want any at the moment. So I left it up to them.
Okay, sounds good. I guess I don't recall where the plan last left off with the data model in terms of whether or not the vision was to support a route-based system for linear referencing, or whether that is really not what is envisioned anymore in the future. It's not. I mean, fortunately for StreamNet at the regional level, we've just a little quick background. We've shifted away from actually transferring data as linear reference data, partially because of the NHD experience and different states doing different things, right? So I think we have a decent plan to, in the interim, sort of keep going, but obviously thinking of a long-term vision, it'd be nice to somehow land in a space where this stuff does integrate in an elegant way again. So happy to kind of follow developments, and I think as long as Jay and other the BLM and the Forest Service, I suppose, gets to Cedric's question, is clearly with NHD frozen, those who are using that geometry for their work are kind of stuck in this space of basically diverging and having their copy of hydro that they're using for their needs, and the roads will hopefully meet again. But I could be curious what the Forest Service and the BLM are doing.
I can't speak for them, although we've set up a bunch of projects with Forest Service in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and into Montana that I'm aware of.
For LiDAR,
for 3DHP.
Oh, good.
So Brian Staub, Brian. So they're concerned with salmon, right? Just like lots of other people are, and so they have funding connected to that, and there's a lot of other issues. So we're definitely taking feedback from them, and we're working with them on these particular types of projects throughout the Northwest. They've got funding for that. There's an open line of communication between them and Steve and Sue, just like with Jay. There are NSGIC, National States Geographic Information Council meetings connected to 3DHP now that are provide information about that. I don't know if you're invited or about those at all. So there's information that comes out via that methodology sometimes. It doesn't look right now the way it did when you first heard about it, right?
Yeah.
So when we were first having conversations and you're involved in some of those, 3DHP was going to look a lot different than it does right at this moment, right? And so I don't ever say no, that can't happen. I think there's always a possibility that something can change or can happen, because I've seen that through this whole process. You know, we've taken feedback and things have moved. The needle has moved from it's here to it's over here now, right? And it isn't necessarily where maybe you want to see it or Jay wants to see it or other folks want to see it yet, but it doesn't mean it won't get there.
Right.
You know, so.
And then to be clear, I don't have, where I want to see it. It's just trying to deal with the practicality of like trying to collaborate across states and have a common picture. So I think what we're doing now is working fine. I just, I see mostly NHG and 3HP as a bag of geometry to grab features to assemble a cartoon that reflects reality good enough to do the job we need to do, which is really focused on fish data. So
that's a good way to look at it. That's what it is. You know, it's simple, right? It's points and lines. You know, what do you want to call them, or what kind of labels / attributes you want on them? You know, that's up for debate and conversation. You know, I mean, that's, is it going to have reaches? Is it going to have reach codes? What will it have? What will it not have? All those things are still questions that are being worked on. You know,
well,
some of your questions I can't say yes or no to or answer, right? I'm kind of stuck on some
for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks
I
again,
appreciate.
Tom.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Van.
Yeah.
Thanks, Van. Do you want to go ahead? Yeah. Hi, I'm Esther. I'm with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I think I've come across your work before, though, in the Marshall Islands. You've done surveying work out there?
We've done. We're collecting LiDAR out there. Yeah.
Oh.
If that's your question.
No. I just I thought I'd seen your name before. Some Marshall Islands work. Anyway, I was wondering about you mentioned briefly the NHD plus HR data set. I was wondering how that compares to the NHD in terms of like the reliability or the accuracy.
So I don't think the accuracy is improved with the HR. It's just a higher resolution data set. So you would see something in that over those areas that gives you maybe a little more density of stream network. Nothing that compares with 3DHP though, like those examples I showed you. Nothing that matches that.
Gotcha. Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Tom. Cedric, is yours quick?
Yep.
Great.
I think so. So, Tom, you mentioned that you guys are almost done with the first pass and you're going to be starting the second pass. Is the first pass going to complete the entire nation?
The LiDAR collect?
Yes.
Yes, with maybe a few exceptions of tribal areas.
Okay, I asked because. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, those are some points we're still working on now. We're always in conversation with tribes. Lots of interaction with them in all of our states. I'm involved in that in the Northwest states. Some tribes are more amenable to it than others are, and it's like, just they're concerned about data and privacy and resources and things. So go ahead with your question though.
Yeah, I asked because we were told in January that we were 3 years away from having the elevation data needed for 3DHP for Oregon, for parts of Oregon. So
okay. So that I understand. Yeah, I understand your question. So when we say 95% complete or 89% complete or whatever, that isn't data in hand yet. Those are areas that are covered or being covered. If we fly LiDAR today somewhere, it's at least a couple of years before you have it in your hands, just because of all the things involved in collecting it and processing it and doing the QA on it. We have to QA it to make sure it meets our standards because we have authoritative data out there and we want to make sure it stays that way. You can easily get LiDAR faster if you do it on your own or go through some other mechanism to get it where we're not involved in the QA process. But for us to use it, for us to have it, for us to post it, it has to go through our process of quality assurance to make sure it's good, accurate data. So those graphics that you're seeing where we're almost complete with the country, it doesn't mean that the LiDAR is in hand.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. We really appreciate your availability this morning. Anything else for Tom before we move on?
Please feel free to email me if you have other questions. I can pass on to our 3DHP team. If you want to get one of those folks on with the details, I can arrange that to get Sue or Steve on to get down in the weeds and some of the stuff with you, or any of your folks. Just let me know on that.
I have one thing. I know you said you don't really have the model for how you're going to refer to all these reaches and such, but just to, you've probably heard it 1,000 times, but us fish people think of rivers, not reaches. So we really like if there was some kind of coding that said, this is the Columbia River from mouth to the headwater.
So my advice, send me an email giving me your concerns that I can pass on. That way the other folks on the other end of this that are making these decisions have things like that in front of them as they're making decisions and making calls on what this thing's supposed to look like. It can't happen without feedback, right? Just like the conversation we just had with Van. It takes a lot of feedback to make this thing work.
Great. Thanks, Tom. So we are going to move to discussing the next steering committee